Thanks, Chair. We're live.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Licensing Subcommittee today, the 1st of August. My name is Councillor Ajda Ovad and I'm the Chair of Licensing. Before we begin, if I can have those present to introduce themselves, starting with the councillors on the committee, then the officers, the applicant and supporting representatives, and then the licence holder. Firstly, I'll start with the introduction. I'm Councillor Ajda Ovad, member from Northumberland Park and Chair of Licensing. Members, if you can now introduce yourselves.
My name's Emily Arkell and I'm the member for Bounds Green Ward.
I'm Ellen Weston. I'm a councillor for Hornsey Ward.
Thank you. Now, officers, if you can introduce yourselves.
I'm
Good
Rachel
evening, I'm
Bonus.
Dale Barrett. I'm the licensing team leader.
Thank you.
Sorry, Dahlia. I'm Rachel Bonus. I'm the legal officer.
Thank you.
I'm Fiona Ray, Acting Committees Manager, Clerk to this committee.
Thank you. Now the review applicant and supporting representatives. If you can introduce yourself, starting with trading standards representatives.
I'm Michael Squire from the Trading Standards Department.
I'm
you.
Felicia Kemazuma, Trading Standards and Environmental Health Manager.
Thank you.
I'm Marlene Diagla, Public Health.
I'm Maria Ahmed, Public Health Officer.
Thank you. Yeah.
I am Charlie Shanaike. I'm bowing out, but my colleague Felicia is here, so she'll be attending the meeting instead of myself. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And finally, the license holder, please introduce yourselves.
Good evening. It's Robert Sutherland. I'm representing the license holder for the hearing today. Present in the same room but on a different screen is on the left, if you look at your screen, Mr. Kamal Archi, who is the director and also the DPS of the premises. And next to him is Mr. Demir. Mr. Demir is a solicitor, but is also acting here as the translator.
Thank you, Mr. Sutherland. Now with the first item of the agenda, filming at meetings. Please note this meeting is being recorded and will be available for public viewing. Second item, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We have one apology for absence from Councillor Harrison-Mullane and Councillor Weston is present as substitute.
Thank you. Now on to the third item, urgent business. Are there any items of urgent business?
There are no items of urgent business, but there is one additional document which has been submitted by the premises licence holder as additional information, and that's been circulated to all parties and published on the council's website.
Thank you. Fourth item, declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest? Thank you. Fifth item, summary of procedure. The procedure for the meeting has been emailed to all participants by the clerk. For the purposes of any members of the public watching, we will first hear from the licensing officer. After that, the applicant and supporting representatives will present their case, and the committee and the license holder will have the opportunity to ask questions. Then the license holder will present their representation, and the committee and all parties will have the opportunity to ask questions. All parties will then have the opportunity to sum up, and then the meeting will conclude to allow the committee to deliberate and reach a decision. This decision will then be provided in writing within 5 working days of this meeting. Additionally, I'm going to note the ground rules for this remote hearing as follows. Please ensure your cameras are open and that you're muted when you're not speaking. If you have technical difficulties, please use the chat function. Please do not use the chat function for putting formal questions to the subcommittee. If you wish to speak, please raise your hands and direct all communication via the chair. We will take all papers as read unless there is anything you wish to draw our attention to. All speakers will be allocated 5 minutes to speak. When speaking, please be succinct and do not exceed the allocated time unless you request for an extension of time, which is at the discretion of the chair. Please do not share addresses of speakers, and in the event that there be several speakers for each party, please avoid repetition and perhaps consider having a spokesperson to address all concerns. Now, the sixth item, which is the application for review of a premises license for Star Food and Wine, 23 Westbury Avenue, Wood Green, London, N22 6BS, Knoll Park. Ms. Barrett, please can you introduce your report?
Thank you, Chair. The panel has before them the application for the review in relation to Star Food and Wine, 23 Westbury Avenue, N22. And this review is initiated by the Trading Standards Responsible Authority and relates primarily to the objective of the prevention of crime and disorder. The application can be found at Appendix 1 in the report, and just to highlight that it primarily concerns an incident of the premises on the 22nd of March this year. During an inspection, the trading standards officers came across a lock safe, which was seized following an indication from the tobacco search dogs that the safe, and when the safe was subsequently opened, they did indeed find a quantity of illegal tobacco within the safe. The premises license holder is Hunter's Supermarket Limited, and the designated premises supervisor is Mr. Kamal Avci. You have at section 1.3 there, Chair, the times for the supply of alcohol, which is on a 24-hour basis. In terms of the consideration for the licensing subcommittee, the committee is asked to determine the matter and has the option of either modifying the conditions of the license or to exclude a license of activity from the scope of the license, or to remove the designated premises supervisor, or to suspend the license for a period not exceeding 3 months, or to revoke the license. Whichever option the committee goes with after hearing from all parties, we do ask and we require that full reasons are given as to what was considered appropriate in meeting the licensing objectives. During the consultation period, representation was received from the Public Health Department Chair in support of the review. And in terms of background, Chair, can I just clarify, please, the premises does have or did have an existing license from November 2005. Prior to Mr. Avci having this license, it was in the name of a Mr. Dogan. And you will notice, Chair, that on the premises license on page 37, that there are extensive conditions already put in place on this license. In fact, more or less the same ones that the Trading Standards Officer is in fact asking for as part of this review. If I can just explain how that's come about, Chair. The previous license holder, Mr. Dogan, was also found to have been having a quantity of illegal or illicit tobacco on site, Chair. I think that this was back in March 2021. The Trading Standards team did in fact put forward a review at that time on their findings against Mr. Dogan that was trading at the same address. However, you do have Mr. Sutherland here this evening. He acted on this matter at that point, and agreed with the Trading Standards officers that a minor variation would have been the better course of action, seeing as it was Mr. Dogan's first misstep, basically. However, what subsequently happened was that the minor variation was in fact submitted by this current holder. And so it would seem that Mr. Avci had knowledge of the issues that were ongoing, that had taken place previous at the premises. And obviously the minor variation was submitted in Hunter's Supermarket Limited, and he became the DPS there. In fact, after once the minor variation was then in play, Chair. So we move forward now to 2022, and in early January, the Trading Standards Officer received information that there was some illicit goods on site, and that's why they ended up going back to the premises in January 22 and then found the illicit tobacco that's now subject to this actual review. The Trading Standards Officer, when they speak and set out their case, they'll be able to give more information on exactly what took place. In terms of the licensing policy, in reviewing the licensing subcommittee will consider and take into account the complaints history of the premises and all relevant information. It's clear that a number of reviews may arise in connection with crime that is not directly connected with licensed activities, for example, the sale of contraband goods. The subcommittee does not have the power to judge the criminality or otherwise of any issue, and the subcommittee's role is to ensure the promotion of the crime prevention objective. Chair, I know the report has been read throughout, Chair. So obviously on page 3, we got the mention of the section 17 of the Crime and Disorder Act 1998, as well as the Human Rights Act, Chair, which of course this licenses are subject to. And Chair, just in finishing, just to highlight, obviously you've got within the pack the copy of the license on page 37 and also the representation within the pack from Public Health, which is on page 49 of the initial bundle. And you've got the additional documents that Mr. Sutherland has put in that you've seen today. And Mr. Sutherland will be able to take the panel through that additional paperwork when he speaks. Okay, if you have any questions for me.
Yep, so I was going to ask members if you have any questions. I see Councillor Weston's put her hands up. Yep.
Thank you, Chair. Could you just let us know what the nature of the minor variation was that was agreed at the previous application review in relation to the premises?
Yes, so within, I take you to the license, the issued license itself. So what was agreed that they would be applied for was a raft of the conditions that you see on page 41 onwards up to page 43. So the majority of those, I think the Trading Standards Officer has in the current review application, save for one item, I believe, at the end. But yeah, it would seem obviously that Mr. Afji already has the majority of these matters that he was needing to be compliant with already on the license.
Thank you. Councillor Arkell, do you have any questions for Ms. Barrett? Thank you. So the applicant, do you have any questions for Ms. Barrett? No? Licence holder, do you have any questions for Ms. Barrett?
Madam, yes, if I may just have one question. It's possible Ms. Barrett actually mentioned it, and my apologies if I did not hear it. I believe there's a transfer of the licence application which was lodged in the early part of 2021 prior to the minor variation. I don't know whether you can confirm that for me, please.
That's correct. The transfer was submitted on the 12th of July 2021, and the minor variation was in fact submitted on the 19th of July 2021.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions or for Ms. Barrett? Okay, thank you. We will now hear from the review applicant and supporting representatives. First, if the applicant Trading Standards can present their case. Thank you.
Right. Good evening, Chair. I'll just give you a quick summary of the events to which obviously Ms. Barrett has already made reference to. This matter started in early January 2022 when intelligence information was received that suggested that there was illegal tobacco being sold from the premises at 23 Westbury Avenue. An inspection was carried out on the 19th of January 2022 by trading standards officers. Mr. Avci was present, the DPS, on that occasion. During that inspection, no illegal products were found, and officers discovered that there was a locked safe behind the counter on the premises. The officers asked Mr. Avci if they could look in the safe to check for tobacco, and Mr. Avci said he did not have the key on the premises. The officers advised Mr. Avci to have the key on the premises in future, and that they would return on another occasion to inspect the shop again and look in the safe. Indeed, on the 22nd of March 2022, one officer did return to the shop, this time with a tobacco detection dog and handler. Again, an inspection was carried out of the premises and no illegal tobacco was found initially. Again, Mr. Avci was asked if officers could look in the safe, and again, Mr. Avci said the key was not on the premises. The tobacco dog was deployed and indicated that the safe contained tobacco. To cut a long story short, the safe was actually seized and a receipt given, as the dog had indicated that there was tobacco in the safe. It was subsequently arranged that Mr. Avci and his representatives would attend the offices of the Trading Standards Department, where the safe would be opened in his presence. The safe was opened in his presence, and 1,040 cigarettes were seized, which had a duty value of £420. Also in the safe was a quantity of cash. The cash was returned to Mr. Avci and the cigarettes were seized. The tobacco that was found in the safe was not of UK standardised packaging, so it didn't have the drab greeny grey packaging. It had more coloured packaging that you would get with more of the foreign brands, or the sort that you used to be able to get in the UK before the law changed. It can be a criminal offence under the standardised packaging of tobacco regulations to supply tobacco products which are not in this drab dark green packaging. It can also be a criminal offence under the tobacco and related products regulations to sell tobacco products with no health warnings, or health warnings which are not in English, which was the case with these cigarettes. It can also be a criminal offence under the Licensing Act 144, Section 144, to keep the non-duty paid goods on a licensed premises. The business, as we know, is operated, the licence holder is a limited company, Hunter Supermarket Limited. Mr. Avci is director. So a letter was sent to Mr. Avci in his capacity as director, asking him a number of questions concerning the seizure. Mr. Avci stated by correspondence that he had deliberately stored the tobacco in the safe to avoid it being discovered during the inspection, and added that the tobacco was not for sale and was for use of shop workers, and he had brought it back from abroad. Mr. Avci confirmed that he was the person who had access to the safe, and that he kept the key away from the premises to prevent a burglary. Subsequent to the seizure, further information was received by Trading Standards from one of the major tobacco companies, who had independently carried out test purchases at the premises not under the direction of Trading Standards, but independently to themselves. They informed Trading Standards that on the 17th of February and on the 4th of March 2022, they had carried out test purchases and had been able to purchase illegal cigarettes from the shop. Just for avoidance of doubt, they did provide information by way of a photograph of the person selling the cigarettes, and I can confirm that it was not Mr. Avci, but it appeared to be one of the shop workers in the shop. Trading Standards are applying for this review, as obviously we have concerns at the amount of legal tobacco in the shop, and we have a number of recommendations. We are initially asking for a number of licence conditions, and as Ms. Barrett has already explained, most of these conditions are already on the licence, as they were put on by way of minor variation just after the transfer of the licence. There is one condition which is remaining, which is, I think, condition 21, which we're asking for, which relates to the availability of keys and codes to any locked rooms or safes. We are still asking for that condition to be added to the licence. Trading Standards are also asking for a period of suspension of the licence. Chair, that is a brief summary of the facts that, as Trading Standards have them. I don't know if I can help you further.
No, that's all. We've already come to the 5 minutes, so thank you so much, Mr. Squire. Do members have any questions for the applicant?
I've just got one. I just want to just double check that I've got this correct in my mind. So the test purchases, they happened before the safe was seized. Is that correct?
Yes, they did. The test purchases were, double check myself.
In February and March, and then
Yes,
it
they
was
were in
seized.
17th of February and 4th of March, and we seized the inspection was carried out.
On the 22nd of March.
22nd of March. That's correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Weston, any questions yet?
Thank you. I'd just like to hear from Mr. Squire, if possible, about sort of what do you think would be the impact, or what might be the impact of the addition of condition 21, as you're suggesting?
Condition 21 is merely there to facilitate a proper inspection of the shop. As you'll be aware, we did visit the shop in January and were unable to carry out a full inspection because we could not look in the safe and the key was not available. And also, again, potentially that could have thwarted us in our second inspection. On the second inspection, we deployed a tobacco dog. Tobacco dogs, as you may imagine, are very expensive to hire. It can cost upwards of £600 a day to hire a tobacco dog and a handler. So obviously we can't travel the borough with detection dogs on a daily basis. So the provision of this condition will allow us access to do a full inspection of this premises in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Squire, it's just for the purposes of clarification in terms of the duty value of the products. I saw at page 29 that it stated that the duty value of the products were approximately £305, but at the bottom of page 10, it said that the duty value of the products was approximately £420. I just wanted to get some clarification, which was correct. What's the correct value?
I think that must have been an error. I think it is £420. I mean, that would be the duty lost to HMRC. Yeah, I think there's an error in there. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Now I'll take questions from the license holder for the applicant.
Thank you, Madam. Mr. Squire, good evening. You may recall, I know that I appreciate you've not referred to it, but it is something which Ms. Barrett, I think, has touched upon, and it is something that I will speak about. In 2021, during the review process, you were provided with, to your satisfaction, documentation which established that the premises had been sold. Do you recall?
Yes. Yeah. What I don't know if you want me to explain further. As Ms. Barrett had alluded to, we had seized tobacco from this premises, and we had put in an application for review, and obviously Mr. Sutherland was involved. There was an application for a transfer, and it was shown to me that the premises had indeed been sold to Mr. Avci and Hunter Supermarket. During discussions with Mr. Sutherland, it was agreed that in order to effectively sort the matter out, the new applicant would apply for a minor variation, adding additional conditions to prevent issues with illicit tobacco, which obviously stem back to a previous seizure prior to the sale, as the sale had effectively come across the process of the review. I don't know if that explains the situation, Mr. Sutherland.
No, thank you. That's most helpful. In relation to the conditions which are being put forward, I've indicated through Mr. Avci's statement, and it may be that you haven't seen it, that all of the conditions are agreed, specifically condition 21. Does that assist, Mr. Squire?
Yes, I have read your documentation, and I think it had been an oversight that I hadn't realised that these conditions were largely already on the licence. Certainly, yes, condition 21 is the key condition, and yes, and I understand you have agreed it.
Thank you. What would assist, I think, in looking at the conditions which you're recommending to the committee, some of the wording of those conditions would actually be more applicable to the premises than, in fact, the conditions which are on the license. So if I could draw your attention to, if I may, number 14, which I think is on page 14 of the agenda papers. Condition 14 refers to all tobacco products which are not on the covered tobacco display cabinet or on the under-counter shelf marked for tobacco stock should be stored in a container clearly marked tobacco stock.
Yes,
this container should be kept. You're probably familiar with the premises that in fact there is an under-the-counter shelf where tobacco is kept. And I'm anticipating that hence your wording at number 14, which is slightly more comprehensive than the condition which is on the current license.
Yes, we're happy to swap that condition over if I understand from previous discussions with you on another matter that the wording of that initial condition can sometimes prevent the legitimate storage of tobacco under the counter. And obviously that's not our intention, is to prevent legitimate tobacco being stored in a correct place or in an obvious place for supply. So yes, we'd be happy to swap that condition over.
And then condition 15.
Mr.
Sorry,
Sutherland, do you have how many more additional questions do you have?
Madam,
just for the purposes?
I'm hoping that this is helping the committee in clarifying any what may appear to be differences between us are in fact not differences, and that's what I'm trying to achieve through this. The only other condition, Madam, that I would look to refer to is probably number 15, which is the same in the sense that it refers to the under-counter drawer. Again, would there be any difficulty in swapping the current license condition for the one that you're recommending, Mr. Squire?
No, there would be no difficulty in that.
Madam, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sutherland. Are there any other further questions or points of clarification for the applicant? Yep, Councillor Weston.
Thanks, Chair. I'd just like to hear from the applicant a little bit. The guidance which is quoted on page 2 of the agenda pack talks about in the circumstances which are reflected in the circumstances that we're considering this evening. It's expected that revocation of the licence, even in the first instance, should be seriously considered. Now, I was just wondering why Mr. Squire hasn't requested that as a potential outcome of this evening and instead has requested a suspension with some minor changes to the licence. So some clarity on that would be really helpful. Thanks.
Madam, in this instance, or in most instances where it is a first offence, so to speak, I normally recommend a suspension. Obviously, the final decision is a matter for the committee. Often we feel that in trading standards, we feel that a suspension can sometimes be of a significant punishment for a licensed premises, as obviously alcohol makes up a major part of their sales. And if it is effectively a first offence, I know we're not using offences, but if it's a first occasion, a first incident, then we would hope to work with the premises to improve their performance in the future. And obviously a revocation can take away the livelihood of the shop. But having said that, it obviously is a matter for the committee to decide, but that is our thinking behind it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to now move on. Oh, sorry, Rachel, before I move on, see your hands up.
Yes, thank you. Just a point of clarification there, Chair, if I may, in relation to the decision that the committee will make. Revocation is not about sanctions, it's about promotion of the licensing objectives. I just wanted to make that point at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Okay, now I'll move on. If I can now hear from the applicant supporting representatives from Public Health.
Hi, Chair.
Hi, Maria.
So I'll just introduce our representation. So just in summary, we Public Health have made a representation under the licence objectives, crime and disorder, protecting children from harm. And we have concerned the applicant's ability to uphold the licence objectives following 1,040 illegal cigarettes were seized from the premises under Mr. Kamal's supervision, who is the designated premises supervisor. Although he claims in his witness statement he was not present at the premises at the time of inspection, it is still within his legal duty to ensure he is committed to the licensing objectives. So the premises is located in a residential area with 5 primary schools located nearby. This is concerning as children and young people are easier to target by low price and unregulated illicit cigarettes, and therefore act as an easy gateway into smoking, and it can damage their health and bring them into contact with criminals. And usually the people making money out of this do not care who they sell it to, and it's most likely to affect young people. And with the cost of living concerns growing, smokers could increasingly turn to illicit tobacco, which is cheaper. And the incident that has occurred at the premises will not only hamper council efforts to reduce smoking related harms, it undermines our smoking cessation services. It also widens the existing health inequalities as illicit tobacco is most readily available in poorer communities where smoking rates are disproportionately high. The smoking prevalence in adults in Haringey is 14.9%, which is actually higher than the London and England levels. And from our intelligence data, there is significantly higher prevalence of smokers in Knoll Park ward, particularly, and it's higher than the Haringey average where the premises is located. 1 in 2 long-term smokers will die from smoking, whether it is illegal or legal, but illegal tobacco smoking fuels ill health even more so than the legal tobacco, and it gets kids into smoking. Smoking places a substantial burden not only on individuals but also on the NHS, social care and society. In our latest data, smoking attributable hospital admissions in Haringey were higher than the London and England averages. The premises is currently operating 24 hours, and we are not confident in the license's ability to promote the licensing objectives following the illicit tobacco found at the premises, and it undermines the public health impact to reduce smoking related harms in the community. The Haringey statement of licensing policy states that where illicit goods have been found, it is considered poor management. They already had a number of conditions and it did not change their practice. Therefore, we recommend that the committee considers revoking the licence, and if the licence is not revoked, then we suggest the applicant to join the responsible retailer scheme to protect children and young people who are one of the groups that are most impacted by illicit substances. Thank you, Chair. That is all.
Thank you, Ms. Ahmed. Do members have any questions for Ms. Ahmed? No?
I do, but
Yeah.
Emily, do you want to go first?
You go first, Ellen.
Thanks. Thanks, Chair. I've got 2 questions, if that's okay, and they're on slightly different matters. So if I could just ask the first and get a response. So the first is on the comments around the licensing objective around protecting children from harm. I understand the broad points that are being made, of course I do, but I wonder, Ms. Ahmed, whether you're basing these recommendations on any evidence that children have been encouraged to buy illicit tobacco at this premises, or in fact whether, as you said, this premises has had the effect of introducing children in the area to criminals, because they're quite bold claims, and I'd be quite keen to know whether you've got any specific evidence that linking this premises to those claims.
I don't have particular evidence on that premises, but it is kind of known. Research does tell that children and young people are easier to target, and it does show in our public health study and Public Health England report. So yeah, that's it really from, I don't know if Marley wants to add anything, or, but it is in our research that does say that, mention it.
Councillor Weston, your second question?
Thanks. And my second one relates to, so on the bottom of page 49, there's a statement that finishes has likely exacerbated issues in the area. I wonder if you could just tell us what issues you're referring to, and particularly given that your report mentions there are 13 licensed premises within that local area, what evidence there is to suggest that this premises has exacerbated those issues.
So smoking is related to a number of conditions. For example, diabetes, the non-communicable diseases. So it's more likely to exacerbate the health issues that are already present in the area. That's what I'm referring to, just the kind of health side of it.
Thanks.
Councillor Arkell?
It's just a very quick question. You mentioned about the smoking prevalence rates in Noel Park, and as I understand, the location of this premises is actually at a crossroads between three other wards, in actual fact, in Haringey. I was just wondering if you had information about smoking rates in those wards as well. So the wards I'm referring to are, I think, Haringey, West Green, and assuming, I don't know what the fourth one is, but it's kind of like in an intersection. I wonder if there's anything that about its location that has caused kind of issues with primary schools or children accessing those products.
So in our data, it does show that the smoking prevalence is higher in Noel Park, West Green and Haringey wards. In relation to children, I would have to come back on that point. And regarding the 13 licensed premises that I've listed, is to kind of show that alcohol and tobacco use are highly correlated behaviours. So people who are dependent on alcohol are 3 times more likely than those in the general population to be smokers, and people who are dependent on tobacco are 4 times more likely than the general population to be dependent on alcohol, which is why I've listed the alcohol, the other off licenses, and there's mention of alcohol in my rep.
Thank you. Members, do you have any further questions? Thank you. The licence holder, do you have any questions for Ms. Ahmed?
No questions.
Yes, Mr. Sutherland. No questions?
No questions.
Thank you. Okay. Now I'll move on to the licence holder. Can I please get the representations from the licence holder, Mr. Sutherland?
Madam, thank you. Can I first of all say that my laptop is quite low down, so it probably makes me look as though I'm quite tall, but the reality is not that. And also my camera is very close to me, so it's possible that with all the documents and paperwork that I have, that I may appear that I'm not looking at you while I'm talking. And my apologies if it appears rude. I don't intend to be. It's purely the way that it is set up. In relation to this particular matter, it may assist if I touch on the background. Whilst it is correct to say that I am common both to the review of last year and also the review of this year, I wouldn't want that to be taken against my client in any way. I was instructed by somebody completely different. It so happened that they were in the process of selling the premises when the review was commenced, and because I had been instructed, I remained instructed and dealt with Mr. Squire as we reviewed the situation. I satisfied him, as he's indicated, that it was a genuine arm's length sale, and on the basis of that, we dealt with both the transfer of the licence and then a minor variation and that disposed of the review proceedings from last year. That brings us to this year, Madam, and obviously the committee have heard the circumstances and situation. In relation to this particular application, I have submitted a bundle of documents which I'm hoping the committee have had a chance to read. The start of that bundle deals with a witness statement from Mr. Kamal Avci, and he wishes me to stress to the committee that he apologises to the committee and to Mr. Squire for the situation which has caused him for this application to be made and for him to come in front of the committee. He sets out the situation in relation to the items which were in the safe and that they belonged to himself, his family, also I think to some staff members, that the intention was that the majority of the items were for their own use, but he does accept that had the opportunity arisen to sell the items that he would have done. And on that basis, I've advised him that we need to be accepting this situation and working with trading standards to make sure that this doesn't happen again. In respect of the, I'm somewhat hampered by the, and I know some questions were raised about the undercover instance and sales purchases that were made in February and March. I don't have details of those. I don't know who they were by. We don't know, I don't specifically know the member of staff. I haven't seen any photograph at all, but we are able to indicate that Mr. Avci did come across somebody that he spotted was selling illicit tobacco, cigarettes, and he has dismissed that individual. I know not whether it's the same person, but it may well be. In respect of the situation, what I would commend to you really are the steps that have been taken, the intention by Mr. Avci to promote the licensing objectives. So we've indicated here that we've agreed to a number of the conditions, to all of the conditions. I do need some changing of the wording, and you've heard from Mr. Squire that in fact the ones that he's recommending in relation to the under-counter draw, that they can be added to the license to replace the conditions which are currently there. There is, in relation to the keys, the difficulty had been that it was a specialist key. It wasn't kept at the premises for security reasons, and it was only taken to the premises if the safe was needed to be used. The way that they've got around that at the moment is that the key will be kept at the premises.
Sorry to cut you short. The 5 minutes has elapsed. If you can just sum up in a sentence or so, please.
Thank you, Madam. That, of course, then deals with the condition which is agreed in relation to that. There is a condition that I would look to explore with the committee, which is the to deal with the documentation, invoices, etc. They're kept at the premises, but because of VAT requirements, it does mean that only a quarter is kept immediately at the premises, though they can be provided at very short notice. And I'm sure there'll be questions, Madam, and it's probably best I leave it at that and pick up any questions that the
Thank you, Mr.
members
Sutherland.
have.
Thank you so much. Any members have questions for Mr. Sutherland? Yeah, Councillor Weston.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Sutherland. Could you let us know when Mr. Avci obtained the personal licence that's been issued by the London Borough of Lewisham? So that's referenced in the copy of the licence, which is at page 38 of the original bundle.
Thank
So I suppose my
you,
question is,
Madam.
how long has Mr. Avci been a personal licence holder?
Understood. I've got Mr. Avci next to me, and I'm just going to check. I've got a copy. We've got a copy of it, and I believe it was issued last year. It must have been certainly before we applied in July for the variation of the DPS.
And is that the only personal licence or licensable activity that Mr. Avci's been responsible for?
Sorry, madam, are you asking about, has he operated at any other premises prior to this?
Yeah, yeah,
sorry,
I suppose so, yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry if I wasn't clear,
No,
Mr.
no,
Sutherland.
no, that's fine. This is the only premises, madam. There are, sorry, this is slightly developing your question, if I may. There are, I understand, 3 personal licence holders now at the premises, and we are, because I know it's been suggested, working to apply for the responsible retailer scheme, and I'm just trying to get all those details of the personal licence holders together, because it is part of the personal responsible retailer scheme. Sorry, madam.
Councillor Weston, do you have any further questions?
No, I don't think so, thank you.
Councillor Arkell, do you have any questions?
No, I don't, thank you.
I think for myself, my one question, Mr. Sutherland, is just, I know that one of the conditions is on the current premises license is that the licensee will join the council's responsible trader scheme. And it was mentioned in the papers that they're currently not a member of the responsible trader scheme. Just wondering why that hadn't happened.
Madam, I think to be fair to Mr. Avci, some of the responsibility may be mine, to which I hold my hands up. I think Mr. Avci understood, certainly when he'd taken over the property, and I'd assisted him with a minor variation, which is really when I stepped away from the premises. My understanding was that somebody would contact him from the council, and I indicated that to him. No one contacted him from the council, and on that basis, I think it has just slipped under the radar with other things going on. And now that, of course, that it has come back to light, I've made it clear to him. In fact, that's what he was saying to me, and I apologized and said, look, it's actually on the website. Let's work our way through it. And my colleague, Mr. Demir, has actually been working with him to make sure that the application is in for the responsible retailer scheme. And as I say, I think the only thing that they're missing is one of the personal license holders' details.
Thank you, Mr. Sutherland. Does the applicant have any questions for Mr. Sutherland?
Yeah, I just got one question, Mr. Sutherland. Was your client aware, and what did he understand by the condition that was existing on his license that said that only tobacco which is available for retail sale should be stored at the licensed premises?
I think the intention here was that the only tobacco, as far as he's concerned, that was available for retail sale was the items, or were the items that were on the behind the display and also on the drawer. I think that from his perspective, there was no definite intention to organise sales of illicit tobacco from this premises. And I think it's really, once I've questioned him and gone through the interview under caution with him, which obviously you'd submitted the questions to him, and I investigated a little bit more as to his responses, that it became clear that it was more opportunistic. I think that, of course, he would use the tobacco, but if somebody approached him and asked him for such tobacco and he knew them, then he would have sold it to them. And I think on that basis, he's clearly not complying with the law. And I have stressed to him that that is not permitted. And clearly, with that condition on the license, he mustn't do it again. And he's under no misapprehension now. That's something that it would be permitted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do Public Health have any questions for Mr. Sutherland?
No further questions from me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or points of clarification from any other parties for the license holder? No? Okay, can each party now sum up, starting with the licensing officer, then applicant and supporting representatives, and finally the license holder? Please keep succinct. Thank you. So Ms. Barrett, if you can please sum up first.
Thank you, Chair. There's no recommendations, obviously, from the licensing service. Obviously, the committee will make its decision as set out in the report.
Thank you. Mr. Squire, can you please sum up, please?
Yes, as I've already said, we are seeking a suspension of the licence and the additional condition regarding the access to the locked areas. Obviously the cigarettes, there's no question the cigarettes were stored on the premises. There was a licence condition in place which required only tobacco, which was available for retail sale, to be on the premises. And Mr. Avci has admitted that if he had had the opportunity, he would have considered selling the cigarettes. That's all I'd like to say.
Thank you. And Public Health, Ms. Ahmed, can you sum up, please?
Just to summarise, we recommend that the committee considers revoking the licence, and if it is not revoked, then we suggest the applicant joins the responsible retailer scheme. This is to protect the children and young people who are one of the groups most likely to be impacted by the illicit substances. There are schools around there. Lordship Lane Primary School is located really quite close by. And from our research from Public Health, we know that those illicit tobacco is there's high prevalence of smokers in North Knoll Park ward than the Haringey average. It puts burden on the individuals, but also on the NHS and social care and society. There was already a number of conditions that were in the license, and it did not change their practice, and it still continued. So yeah, that is in summary.
Thank you, Ms. Ahmed.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the license holder, can you please sum up, please?
Thank you, Madam. In respect of the situation, I would invite the committee to replace the similar conditions which are on the current licence with the ones which are proposed by Mr. Squire. I think the wording of them is more applicable in relation to this particular premises. In respect of, it's suggested that the licence be revoked because of the impact in relation to children. There is no direct evidence, and certainly that is quite strongly disputed by Mr. Avci, that there has been or would be any sales to underage people at the premises. In respect of that, therefore, we would submit that a suspension of the premises licence is appropriate in this particular matter. The premises, as has been indicated through the statement that you'll have seen, has been closed for several months already, in which case they've carried out a refurbishment, and has only just reopened. And it's in those circumstances, I would invite the committee that any suspension be for a short period. I would suggest in weeks rather than for any longer period. But on that basis, Madam, unless I can assist you further.
Thank you. Ms. Ahmed, is it a point of clarification that you want to make?
Yeah, I just wanted to say it does kind of impact children, young people. I mean, there is strong evidence to suggest that in England, 2/3 of adult smokers report that they took up smoking before the age of 18. And, you know, the close proximity to schools of tobacco retailers, and that increases youth access to tobacco.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ahmed. Thank you. I've heard all the summary points for all parties. Thank you all. We have now come to the end of this item. I ask that all parties please leave the meeting room so that the committee members have an opportunity to deliberate and make a decision on the application. The parties will be notified of the decision in writing within 5 working days of this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone.